Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you on Leadership Insights with me, Prashant. आप सबको मेरा प्यार भरा नमस्कार. As every week, we bring forward a guest on this show who can help us in our mission of spreading the awareness about leadership, of bringing in some insightful perspectives of what leadership is and what leadership is not. And today, we have another amazing guest with us to share his insights, his perspectives through his experiences with us. He is currently the Executive Vice President, Global Marketing at Vadhwani Foundation. He spearheads the marketing activities of the Vadhwani Foundation globally. His career has been replete with launching and managing leading FMCG brands like Airtel, Royal Challenge, Matisse, Tata Indicom, Videocon, Sansui, and Kenwood. He has more than 25 years of experience across leading organizations like Bharti Airtel, Tata Teleservices, Shaw Wallace, Videocon, Bennett & Coleman, Biocon, and Daewoo Motors. That's an amazing experience and speaks volumes about him. He's an avid columnist as well in leading publications and has been extensively awarded for his marketing initiative over the years. He has honed his marketing and managerial skills from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania, Marcus Evans, London, Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and Tata Management Training Center, Pune. So without any further delay, let's welcome our today's guest with us, Mr. Atul Raja. Hi Atul, a very good morning to you.
Hi Prashant, thank you for a wonderful intro and thank you for having me here.
You're welcome, and I would like to thank you, Atul. I understand that you're not feeling well. There are challenges that you have regarding your health, but you still made it on the show and here to give your best and add value to us. So thank you so much for doing that.
My pleasure, Prashant.
Great. So Atul, to start the conversation, the first question itself is heavy. The first question itself is very direct. So we'll just directly dive into it. And that question is that a survey was done by McKinsey where it was reported that more than 76% employees described their leaders as toxic. And more than 75% felt that their immediate leader, the immediate manager, is the most stressful part of their job. Now, when I say this and when you hear this, Atul, what are your first thoughts on this?
Yeah, so very frankly, I'm not surprised to hear about this survey findings. But, I have a view on this. See, leadership is a conundrum, right? On the one side, you can't force leadership onto people on one side of the coin. On the other side, there is unexpected leadership, right? A lot of leaders get into positions because of unexpected situations. So let's take two quick examples, right? One is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs' autocratic style of leadership. His own colleagues called him scary. He surrounded himself with like-minded people. Now, these are things that you'll hear in no textbook, right? But then see the results, right? Apple continues to be one of the most valuable companies in the world, right? Look at the other style. Jack Welch comes to my mind, GE. One of the youngest leaders at GE went to hold on to his leadership position for 2 decades. His style of leadership, what was described as boundaryless, Anybody, according to him, who was a contributor was a leader, right? So he believed in creating an army of leaders. Delegation was key to him. He created a corporate culture that cultivated new leaders, right? But for him, change was constant. So from his angle also, there was a lot of consternation within GE, like why so many changes are happening at one point of time, right? But the fact remains that two great leaders with two outstanding pedigrees on the one side, totally different styles of leadership on the other side. But the common fulcrum was that both of them got great results. While Apple remained as the most valuable organization on this globe, Jack Welch took GE from a $13 billion organization to close to a $500 billion organization in 2 decades, right? So my response to this is that leadership is very intriguing. It does not come easy. It always evokes strong emotions. And intriguing is the key word. So once we discuss leadership today, I think let's begin on this intriguing note.
Sure, Atul. Now, Atul, in your conversation, what I hear is results, right? If you look at Apple, if you look at GE, if you look at where Steve Jobs has taken Apple to, and it becoming the supreme, the premium of quality of innovation, they are the pioneers in that. Whenever anybody speaks about innovation or quality, Apple is spoken about, right? And whenever anyone speaks about exponential growth in a very small period of time, people speak of Jack Welch and people speak of G. And there are a lot of people who read leadership, who try to understand leadership from their perspective of what they did. There are case studies that are taught in B schools about them, right?
Sure.
Now, in the conversation, we did speak about results, which means we spoke about a certain $1 million to a certain $1 billion. We spoke about from Apple not being anything, being in a garage, to actually being a premier organization right now. And it's all talking about numbers, right? And what I noticed today and have been noticing for a while now, that when it comes to leadership, one factor that gets constantly spoken about is results. That, okay, tell me, what did you produce as results in your previous organization, is one of the top questions that leaders get asked in the interview. And even in their performance appraisals, the biggest question is saying that, where were you last year and where have you taken the results of the organization or your team, or in alignment with the vision of the organization in the past year, right? Everybody speaks about results, and results are important because that's what keep the business running. If the results don't show up, the stakeholders' trust is lost, the customers' trust is lost, and the organization goes down. Now, taking away from the results, moving to a parallel and talking about the people element of it, right? You said that Steve Jobs only had like-minded people around it, which means people who agreed with him, who said yes to him, who aligned with what he's saying and just executed what he wanted to get executed, is what he actually built. And Jack Welch actually liked change, he accepted change, and he knew that the way to grow an organization is to make more Jack Welches in the organization, and people who are leaders need to grow at each and every level that they're there. Now, let's talk about the people element here, because the survey that we are talking about is about the people. There is no one in the survey who is saying that results are not right or results are not driven. All they are saying is that, yes, I understand that we need to focus on results, but the way it is being done, the how part of it, is where the people are suffering. So what is your take on that when it comes to the how part of the people aspect of the whole business?
Yeah, so perhaps Prashant, we'll discuss it during our course of the conversation in more detail, but you are actually taking words out of my mouth. So results are given, right? If you are a leader and you need to stay in the leadership position, you are answerable to a board and things like that, and you are responsible for the bottom line, and that keeps the organization going. So that is given. But a great leader is also a great people's manager. That's what I feel, right? It's not easy to do that balancing act, and that's why I called it intriguing. There are some people who say, come what may, I have these limitations and I don't have a great team, or I have an organization that is laid back, but I have to drive the results. So the only way is to do it through a stick, right? And there are other great leaders who know how to work around these constraints, right? Who know how to turn things around, who know how to motivate people, who know how to take the team along with them, right? So in essence, what happens on one side, you achieve the results, but you achieve it with great deal of heartburn. Perhaps the talent stickiness will never be there. Like in the case of Steve Jobs that I told you, if he had an idea at 2 in the morning, the entire organization was rushing to the Apple office in the Bay Area to discuss Steve's brilliant idea at 2 a.m., right? So that's a style of management that he couldn't do away with, right? On the other hand, in the other case, example that I gave you, maybe there are other leaders who would have been in a huddle and who would actually go back to their leader with a bottoms-up bucket of ideas, right? How to do things. So the how part is absolutely, you are right, is very important. It's very difficult to go and take an empowered organization along with you and do the results, and it's very easy On the other side, to be a harsh leader and drive the results through a stick. So that's what actually creates great leaders, right? So people will stay with you, people who believe in your values, in your ethics, and so that's how. And I was with Biocon, and that's the example. The top leadership team with Kiran at that point of time was the team that actually was with her when she started from a garage. Right? And they stuck around. One of them was president finance, one of them was president marketing. So imagine from there, when they used to talk about, there was no chair to sit. From there, they're sitting in plush offices, holding multi-million-dollar businesses and being responsible for them. So that was her leadership style. So that's talent stickiness. They stuck around, and she reaped the benefits of it. The point I was trying to make when I said intriguing is, despite having a very harsh management style, Steve got away with it. Not very many leaders will get away with it.
Interesting. And there are surely reasons for that to happen, which we don't have access to, but people who have worked with Steve would know why did they align with him and what drove them. Because a lot of times, if I just compare it to our lives, there are people around us who probably drive us crazy, but we still are in love with them. Because there is an element to them which actually keeps us bound to them, even though they drive us crazy, and the love towards that element is so much and the attachment is so high that we are ready to bear that pain, because we know that the love is much greater than the pain that we have. Maybe that's something that drove his people to stick with him, drove his people to align with what he wants, because they probably understood the person behind those behaviors that he was displaying externally. So the question that I have for you, Atul, is a lot of times I ask this question to guests here is, what is leadership according to them? But my question to you is with a little bit of twist, which is, what is not leadership according to you?
Right. So see, coming back to the original point, leadership is a great opportunity handed over to individuals. And over the years, I have seen some do an exemplary job, some somehow manage to maintain the status quo, while some fail miserably, right? So this is what I have seen over the years, and therein have been my learning. So let me just answer your question about the don'ts of leadership in two ways. One is the more conventional answer, which I'll take later, which is more organizational and market oriented. Let me just start by the more nuanced nuggets that I have learned over the years. You may or you may not find this in any portal or any textbook, because this is purely experiential, right? So let me start by those small nuances or nuggets, as I call them, before I get into the organizational and market related leadership issues, right?
Sure.
So, clearly the don'ts are very, over a period of in your daily work life that you see, the biggest bane is micromanagement, right? And it has pinched me over the years, right? As a result, empowerment and delegation as a culture becomes non-existent in the organization. I would also say that it's not easy to be a macro manager, right? And yet be confident of the results. But leaders who are able to do it are leaders who reap the benefits of a productive and empowered workforce. Right? So micromanagement is what all the leaders need to avoid. That's what I feel. And knowingly or unknowingly, many of them get into it, right? The second is what I strongly believe in, is walk the talk, right? This is the mirror to the organization, right? This is the inspiration to the organization. What you are talking to the people on a day-to-day basis, your values and beliefs, you need to put it into action yourself. And you need to exemplify it, right? And if you don't do that, then this is a massive failure to inspire the rank and file. And this is what I have seen. The other nugget is, again, very simple. but very important. It's the ability to do good listening, right? Leaders, they may be great leaders, but over the period of time, as they get into the boardroom and into the higher corridors of power, their ability to listen to people reduces drastically, right? And this has an electrifying impact on motivation if you become a good listener. Also, something that is very dear to me, another thing that I always focus on implementation, and I see many people miss out, right? For me, it is 30% strategy and 70% implementation. I'm a great proponent of this, right? But what happens with many other leaders, I feel it's just the reverse, right? So it's too much focus, what I call as the boardroom syndrome, right? You need to get out of the boardroom. You need to get out of fancy strategy making after a certain point of time. You need to roll up your sleeves. And then you need to go out and provide, you can say, energy and motivation to the team for a very streamlined execution methodology, right? This is where I think this is what I call as the last mile, what I learned during my telecom days, when you can take the wire up to the building, but the wire is right up to the doorstep of the building, but if the association doesn't allow you to get inside, you can't wire up the building, and you don't have those additional customers, right? The broadband customers. So this is the last mile learning, that if you don't plan well on your last mile, all your strategy will go for a toss one fine day. And the last nugget that I want to talk about, and again very dear to my heart, is the mediocrity versus meritocracy element, right? You need to call a spade a spade. You don't need to paint everybody with the same brush. You need to call out people from a crowd, performance from within a crowd, and you need to call out non-performance from within a crowd. Okay, so if you do that, it goes a long way in avoiding mediocrity, right? So I just wanted to start answering your question by these nuggets that I do not know whether people get to read about them somewhere, but this is what I have learned over the years. But then there is another very conventional side to the don'ts of leadership, and that's mainly related to the organizational success and how an organization performs in market. And I just want to explain this with a favorite example of mine, right? In early 2016, a very significant event happened when in Finland, Nokia hurriedly called a press conference, and where the then CEO of Nokia, Stephen Elop, he began the press conference by announcing that we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. And then he publicly wept, and this was actually an astonishing announcement, a formal announcement for the downfall of an iconic and most valuable and most visible brands of all time, which was Nokia. And why I'm giving this example is because later on, lots of analysis have happened, and everybody is in unison that it was a great leadership failure. It was not the case of leader failure that pulled Nokia down from where it was, from super heights to super depths, as they say. But also it was a collective leadership failure, right? So to answer your question, to analyze this, this fall of Nokia becomes very pertinent, right? Because everybody acknowledges the fact how Stephen Elop and his backroom team of Yes Boys, how they brought down the company brick by brick, and they didn't do certain things that they needed to do, right? So, what are the learnings from there? And one of the key learnings is that when you are undergoing fast growth, you should always guard against loss of agility, and also against the loss of entrepreneurial spirit. This is what Nokia went through, right? So this is again a very, and what I am telling you is a very unanimously, globally acknowledged as a great leadership failure case, where Nokia was a case study in some of the best business schools on technology, on leadership, and then it went on to become a case study on failure. So I'm giving you that example. So this is one of the first leadership lessons that came out of the fall of Nokia. The second was to guard against complacency, right? Nokia was right at the top of its market leadership. A very significant event happened, and that was the launch of the iPhone. Yeah, but they failed to recognize the threat from a competitor, right? They virtually sidestepped the threat, saying it is no threat, right? So complacency of being at the top can be a killer, right? The third lesson that you learn from Nokia's failure is how a slow pace of innovation can slow down your growth and can pull you down from your market leadership position. Right? Nokia had this Symbian operating software, right? And at a given point of time, it started competing with the iOS and the Android. And knowing fully well that there was nothing unique vis-a-vis its two competitors, even the applications were much lesser and much weaker, Nokia refused to budge from its platform, right? And they had to pay a heavy price for it, right? So they failed to keep up with innovation. They failed to acknowledge, the new market trends, right? And they stuck to their own guns, thinking one fine day some magic may happen, which never happened, right? And the final thing, which is very important, I feel, again, which, a leader should hear the inner voice, not to his inner voice, but to the inner voice of the organization. The leadership team refused to do that. They failed to acknowledge the voices erupting from within the organization for change, right? In fact, the imminent management reshuffle that was to happen at Nokia never happened, right? So the yes boys and Stephen Elop remained where they were, and finally they had to call this press conference to announce, right? So while reading about Nokia's case study, right, I really thought that these are four things that one needs to guard against. So on one side of the coin, I have given you my experiential nuggets. On the other side of the coin, I have given you a case study kind of analysis. So both combined together, I think they form a pretty long list of don'ts of leaders.
Absolutely. They do, and whatever you mentioned, Atul, I can relate to both the sides. To the results that are coming out of the survey, and this is just one survey. There are surveys that are not giving a number like 75 and 76, that are saying 88, 92, 93% as well. And you started this conversation by saying that you're not surprised, and then you mentioned certain things which you mentioned beautifully in two different aspects. One is the people side of it, which comes from your own experience. The other one is from a case study, from an organizational point of view. And if I look at what you said, all points are, end of the day, impacting people, right? If that is how an organization is driven, then the people of the organization will suffer. There is no surprise that if a manager is a micromanager, if a leader is somebody who spends a lot of time in the boardroom, as you rightly mentioned, the boardroom syndrome, does not spend a lot of time with people, is not very agile, is not somebody who actually understands the inner voice of the organization, which will come through people on the front line who are dealing with the customers, people on the front line who are actually putting your product out there, actually know the pulse of the organization. They know what is working, what's not working. So everything that you said, right from micromanagement, right from not listening, getting stuck in the boardroom, not spending time with your people, not being agile as leadership as an organization, only hiring and keeping the yes men around you who say yes to everything that you are saying, not being adjusting and adaptable, and actually being very complacent because you are at the top thinking that you will always remain there. All
Sure.
these factors impact market, impact your customers, and most importantly, they impact your people. So no wonder the numbers of people being dissatisfied with their leadership is very high. Now my question to you, Atul, is, to just dig a little deeper into this, what do you think causes this? As a leader, I'm sure these things have been spoken about. These things are out there, and there are leaders who know that I need to macromanage and I do not need to micromanage. I should listen to my people. I should not avoid my people. I should spend time with my people, care for my people, be compassionate to my people so that I can understand the market, I can understand my people better. Now, these are things that have been spoken for years and years and years. There are books that are 100-year-old, and forget about books that are 100-year-old. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about leadership. So there
Yes.
are books that have been written thousands of years ago. What stops a leader from being this kind of a leader? Do
Right.
you think you can share some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, see, I think what you're saying is absolutely right. There are certain things that are commonsensical, that are out there in the public domain, but they still happen despite the red flags being there all around you, right? Uh, I feel they happen because of a simple reason. Uh, because at the end of the day, the leader is human, right? And he's supposed to undertake a superhuman task in many cases. So while undertaking that superhuman task, somewhere down the line, his human nature sticks with him, right? And he finds it very difficult to dissociate some of the very common elements of human nature that might prove to be a hindrance to a great leadership style. Let me give you a few examples here, right? One is, now I'm talking about from a pure human nature angle, right? The failure to, or you can say how easily you can recognize failure. Right? Your human nature will never allow it, right? If you are sitting with your next level team, it's very difficult to stand up and say, listen, I am a failure or I failed in this context, right? So, but at the end of the day, it's a very endearing quality, and it may be as inspirational as your own success stories, right? To wear failure on your sleeve as a badge of honor is a key leadership trait. So one should not shy away from it. That's what I feel. It's a sign of a great leader, right? So that's one element of human nature. The second element of human nature is, like Prashant, you're sitting today, your wife may tell you something, right? Or your family members may say, listen, you're doing this thing wrong. And you may stand up and say, listen, you don't have the backdrop. This is not wrong. This is right. Again, that's human nature, right? So the ability to take feedback. So that's human nature number two. Again, your mind will always tell you, I am me. I am the CEO, right? I have a great pedigree. I have competencies. I have skill sets, right? But so what, right? At the end of the day, you are human, right? You take feedback, it may be for your betterment. And feedback also relates to something which is called as an open culture, right? If I'm not able to stand up in front of my boss and say, listen, this is what it is. If you do X, you're doing X, and if you do Y, it can produce much better results. And if you can't acknowledge this simple fact, then it becomes a great inhibitor to your leadership style. So that's human nature number two. Human nature number three is, I am there, right? And if somebody else comes close to me, he may become a threat to me, right? So it inhibits, something very important that every leader should do, which is creating a very strong second line.
Hmm.
So succession planning for any leader should be actually absolutely essential.
Hmm.
But then your human nature inhibits this, right?
Hmm.
A great line of second leader actually shows that it's a pretty robust organization that you are in, right?
Hmm.
So that's human nature number 3. Human nature number 4 is, as I said, I am the boss, right? So either you perform or you perish.
Hmm.
Now, how long and how sustainable this can be is highly questionable, right?
Hmm.
If you give the opportunity to your people to rewire, to re-strategize, and come back strongly with better results, I think this can be the biggest motivator to perform.
Hmm.
So, in a sense, to answer your questions, I am adding on 4 more pitfalls to the leadership, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, human nature number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, how they prove to be inhibitors to answer your question. Because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, the leader is a human being, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you can rise above being a human being to being a world-class manager and put all these behind you, then you are on your way to becoming a great leader.
Hmm. So how do we do that? How does the leader do that?
So it all comes with experience, it all comes with maturity, and it all comes with something that I have seen is flexibility, right?
Hmm.
You need to acknowledge the ecosystem around you, right? You need to not just acknowledge and appreciate.
Hmm.
If you appreciate with humility the position that you are holding, all these things will fall into place because you'll reflect, you'll introspect.
Hmm.
And then you will think about others as well, right?
Hmm.
A great leader first will think about others before he thinks about himself, right?
Hmm.
So it's all about mindset change. It's
Hmm.
all about maturing your mindset, maturing your way of thinking as you rise up the corporate ladder. And I personally feel that maturity keeps on coming after every ladder that you climb.
Hmm.
But how far you can actually adapt and be flexible and put your own rigid thoughts at the back burner and keep listening to other people, show more empathy. If all that is there, I think this all will fall into place. Because we are all talking about, your sense of insecurity, your sense of being, I am the CEO, and things like that.
Hmm.
It's not too easy to give away. It's just about being more humble, being more adaptive, being more, you can say, aware of the ecosystem around you, being more appreciative, being more people oriented. That's what we started our discussion with.
Hmm. True, Atul. And from what I hear you saying is that it's I versus we. So as a
Yes.
leader, as we grow, as you said, as we take those steps on our journey of becoming a leader, right from the frontline employee to whatever levels we grow at first, second, senior, or CXO level, with every level we constantly need to be aware of, am I actually creating boundaries? Am I actually creating walls? Am I actually creating and increasing the distance between me and my people? Or
Yeah.
am I actually using my journey of growth to close them up and actually break those walls?
Yeah.
And you rightly said that, very interestingly, and the answer was something that I've not heard before, which is that it's just being human. So if I am insecure, I don't have to beat myself up for it. If I am somebody who is not very comfortable with people and actually is focused more on my performance, my results, and my growth, it's all right. I don't have to beat myself up for it. It's just being human. We are born with those insecurities because it's that survival of the fittest, right? So we are trying to constantly be the one who is the champion so that my growth constantly happens. Now you mentioned something very interesting, that just accept, saying that all right, I seem to be somebody who is insecure, I seem to be somebody who is not very people oriented, I seem to be somebody who's only creating comfort spaces, complacent spaces around me, and that's all right, but I need to shift from it. which means I need to constantly work on it and actually build an inclusive culture where I understand my people, where I spend more time with my people, where I understand the overall objective of my role as a leader is not my growth. You said we need to build succession planning is something that's very important. So I need to focus on how do I build more leaders who actually replace me while I am working on building myself so that I can replace the next level of leadership. That is the idea of growth, right? You constantly need to make yourself redundant. And that fear of insecurity will only come if you are stuck in terms of your skill, in terms of your knowledge, in terms of your growth. Like how you gave an example of Nokia, that we have this software, we have these apps, this is how we have grown to become the huge organization that we are. So I'm closing my eyes and shutting my doors that this is who I am. We will sustain all the changes that are happening around. But there needs to be times when we need to question. And I think that comes from feedback. You mentioned that, right? Being open to feedback. If you actually check with your people saying that, I think Symbian is the right way to go. I think the way we are functioning and moving ahead as an organization is the right thing to do. We will survive this change without actually making a change. What do you think? That is when technology heads, that's when people from the market will actually give you feedback saying that, no, you need to move to Android. This is how the customer's perception is shifting. This is how the user ability is shifting. So we also need to shift. So if you're not open to feedback and if you're rigid in being who you are, again, I versus we, then the growth will not happen for you as a leader and for the organization and for your people. So everybody suffers. So you mentioned very interesting points, very deep
what you're saying is, Prashant, if you tie back with the how we started our conversation, the McKinsey survey, right? And if you go back and talk to those 70+% people who gave a negative shout out as the result of the survey, some of the points that we are discussing here will definitely come out.
Absolutely.
How the stress is caused, how nobody thinks about my family, right? How nobody thinks about my work-life balance. All these things that we are discussing will, and that needs to come out from a more empathetic approach of a leader. And that's what we are discussing, right? So it's a question of rewiring. It's a question of changing your personality even. You need to be mature enough to realize, listen, these are key traits of my personality that may prove to be inhibitors to a leadership style for this kind of an organization, which is very open, very innovative, agile, right? So I need to change. Otherwise, I will never be able to provide effective leadership. So your inner voice should tell you to change and you should change. So it's all about listening to your inner voice.
Well said, Atul. Very interesting perspective. Another point that I wanted to put forward is that, now we have spoken about people, we have spoken about teams. And when we talk about the biggest area of opportunity for leaders, it is team building. When I say team building, getting that cohesive unit together and not just hiring heads that I need to hire 8 headcounts or 80 headcounts and I have filled 80 chairs. Going beyond that of what is real team building. Can you share a couple of your experiences, Atul, as a leader over the years of building teams? And, we could talk about pre-COVID times and COVID times as well. We can mix them both. And, how did you deal with it?
Yeah. So as you're rightly saying, for me, team building is not hiring or team creation, right? It's a totally different perspective I have on team building. Team building is all about how you have a team that feeds upon each other's strengths and leverages from it for taking productivity levels and performance levels to the next stage, right? So that is one aspect of team building. The other aspect of team building is how the team is geared up to take up new challenges, move out of the comfort zone, and develop new skill sets and improve upon, expand the horizons of your performance, as I would say. So these are two key tenets that I see in a team building process. And with these two things in mind, one example that comes to my mind, and let me just exemplify because that's the best way. During my Bharti Airtel days, the internal communications was not supposed to be doing very well, right? And the person who was handling internal communications was on an exit mode because of this reason. And
Okay.
also, the management felt that internal comms was very, very important for the organization at the stage at which it was in at that point of time. So they made a strategic shift. Internal communications as a function shifted from HR to marketing in the hope of something better can happen, right?
Okay.
And as I said, this person, she was on an exit mode. But then this was a classic case how we could package things much better, how the entire marketing team got together to support, to drive, and to guide these new entrants to the marketing team. And this had magical effects. Actually, the entire culture of the organization became more vibrant, and this person who was on the exit mode got the highest rating within the marketing setup and huge appreciation. And when I visited the office years after I had left Airtel, I saw her, she was still there and she was doing very
Wow.
well, right? So this is what so what I'm trying to say, team building is not just a leader exercise, it's a team exercise. A team builds a team. It's not a leader who builds the team, right? So that is one example that comes to my mind. Another example is during my stint at the Tatas, right, where I moved to the next level. So I moved from a Marcom position to a marketing head position, right? The change was substantial in terms of responsibilities, roles, in terms of accountability, and in terms of authority as well. So I had a free hand in building a team at that point of time, but I chose to pick up my Marcom managers and turn them into product managers. Right? So it was not a small change. Basically, it was a change from doing brand building activities to getting into a business development mode. It was a change from spending the advertising dollars to basically taking revenue objectives. So it was a massive change for them as well. But see the result. When we presented the business plan for a telecom launch of a circle, it was unheard of. The business plan went through without a single edit, smoothly. That's what honing up of your skills can do to you, right? So these are a couple of examples of how the team upgraded, upskilled, and for higher objectives, and also how a team got together to support another team member. So these are some wonderful examples that I remember and I cherish still. How things can make a big difference.
Absolutely. So Atul, as a leader, what did you do differently? Because both these examples are amazing. Anybody who is listening to this right now, an employee who is on an exit path, actually staying in the organization, getting inspired and motivated to actually stay in that role, developing that role, and then you going back to the organization after so many years and seeing that employee actually still there and prospering in that role. Then another change of complete vertical and responsibility from spending dollars in terms of advertising and just generating leads to actually a revenue generation mode. It's a completely different mindset altogether. And I understand you said something very powerful, that it's team that builds more teams. Yes, I understand that, and that's a very powerful statement. But as a leader, I'm sure you had a role to play in both these things to happen. You just didn't say that, okay, this is what we are going to do, and it happened. So, as a leader, what do you think you did differently or did not do differently for this to happen? Because that's where the learning for the leaders would come in.
Absolutely. So as a leader, you need to be open to taking challenges and say yes. So number one, I did that, right? So in the very first Airtel example, I did that. I provided great motivation. I gave them the idea of how to package things, right? I gave them and pushed them towards one very powerful idea, was to how to involve the rest of the organization in everything that you do. So we came up with a magazine, which was internal magazine called Leap, right? Where we ensured that we showcased each and every contribution for that particular month, right? That energized the whole organization to some very basic things like holding a movie on every Friday and things like that, where people came and they enjoyed the latest hit that was going around the town and things like that. So, to provide a direction, to give them the big picture, and then leave them to implement it. So that's how. And then the team rallied around because they're seeing that the ideas are powerful enough. So in this case, it was this idea. In the other case, it was, as a leader, you have to recognize, number one, what is the potential of the talent around you, right? Secondly, you also, and this is very important, you have to recognize the fact that there is a team or a team member working along with you who may not have avenues of growth if he stays in the same position, right? And he needs to upskill and take up some additional responsibility to grow within the organization. So this was a key, you can say, motivation for me to pick up a team and then to push them to, to make a business plan is not easy, right? To make a business plan is totally different to make a marketing budget, right? But when I could do it, then why can't my team do it, right? So that was the thought, and Prashant, let me tell you, people grew after that. Some of them have grown, even they are standing shoulder to shoulder with me, or even I see them even growing beyond me. So this is what happens. So this is what a leader can do.
Yeah. And that must bring so much sense of pride in you as a leader, and satisfaction as a human being, right?
Yes.
To see you contributing to people's growth and playing your bit with honesty of what you can do. And that's what leadership is.
Yes.
Doing your bit in your growth, doing your bit in your people's growth, doing your bit in the organizational growth. That needs to be the foundation of leadership. And what you did amazingly well, Atul, and that's for everybody of us to understand here, is the way Atul brought alignment between the organizational goal and the individual goals. Now, you mentioned something very interesting, Atul, that you saw a group of people who would probably not grow beyond who they are because there are lack of opportunities in that domain or with that skill set. So for them to grow as people, they had to be pushed outside what they were doing. Right now is when the opportunities would open up. And the organization also had given you a responsibility of handling that area because organizational goals were aligned with that. So you actually picked up a group of people who you already knew were committed to give their best and wanted to grow, and you brought them into this new domain and actually helped them understand why this is important for the organization, why this is important for their individual goals, and that is what drove them, right? A lot of times leaders get a group of people together and tell them the vision of the organization, talk to them about why is it important for the organization, but they fail to tell people why is it important for you, how is it helping your journey, and why should you be involved or aligned to this. And that bridge between their growth, their aspiration, plus organization growth is what drives people, and that's what you did very beautifully. And this is for leaders to learn and understand why is it important. And second thing, which is again very important, Atul, from your first example, was that you mentioned a word that you actually got the entire organization together, which means you did not let that responsibility be of that one person or that one team. You actually build a culture, you actually spread awareness and information to the entire organization about what we are doing, and you actually brought in the element of inclusivity into it. A lot of times what leaders do is that in certain positions, they create that wall and they actually keep things in a very closed loop. And that is where an employee does not see the impact of it at an organizational level, and the organization also does not see the impact of that employee because it remains within those closed doors. What you created was visibility for that person. So whatever that person and that team was doing, they were getting visibility from the entire organization. Everybody would have been thinking, I'm just imagining it, that what is this new thing that is happening, who is driving it, who is doing it, oh, it's that person doing it, it's that team doing it. So that sense of recognition that person would have felt to do something at an organizational level also brings that inspiration, and it brings inclusivity in the organization as well. So this is something for leaders to pick up, and I understand, Atul, from being the humble person that you are constantly saying it was your team. But a lot of times as leaders, we don't understand the power that we brought to that. We don't understand how we made that difference. And it's important for leaders to accept and acknowledge that as well, that you played a role which actually brought people forward. And the sense of pride which I could sense in you saying that there are people who are doing what you're doing today at your level in hierarchy, some people have grown beyond you and everybody is doing well, that satisfaction is amazing as leader. So thank you for being honest and sharing that with us, Atul. Thank you so much.
It gives you a great deal of pride, and as you're rightly saying, the role of a leader is a great leader is a great facilitator, right? Leader will not do things and tell you, listen, I'm doing this for you, but the leader can really facilitate, give you the options, give you the avenues, give you the ammunition, and also perhaps give you the space to do things, right? So it's a great facilitator. And also, you need to learn. So you learn from your learnings and then you go ahead and implement it. Like in this case, I recall a discussion with my boss, and during one of my appraisals, and when I asked him, where do I go from here, right? So Pat gave the answer, you can take my position.
Okay.
I recall that conversation, but I don't recall it fondly because perhaps that was not the right answer to give to me, right? So I took that as a learning, and I said what I can do for the other people, right? So that's how you learn from things, and you ensure that you don't give the same feeling to others.
And another thing that I see as a consistent pattern in whatever you're saying, Atul, which is important as a leader, I think two things. One, employees taking responsibility for their growth and showing their commitment towards their ambition, their aspirations, and their growth, because a leader is observant of that. Only then the opportunities come your way. And second thing that you said, as a leader, allowing that space, which means you can give ammunition to people, you can show them direction, but end of the day, you're facilitating that journey. You can't take their journey for them. So as a leader, if you, as a team member, if you have that commitment, if you have that hunger, if you have that drive to move towards your ambition, and as a leader, if you see that in your people, you need to facilitate that journey and allow people that space to take their journey and just facilitate that journey. And coming back to your point earlier, which we started with, I think micromanagement comes here, and that fear of somebody else taking up your position and you actually saving your position, all these insecurities also come in. So as a leader, it's important for you to understand that it's all right to have those insecurities, but with time, you have to go beyond those insecurities and actually allow that space for your people to grow and facilitate their journey of growth. And indirectly, unknowingly, you're also facilitating your journey of growth as a leader, because you're also growing by creating that space for them, because you have never done that before. So even you don't know how will that turn out. So you're also growing as a leader, right?
Yeah.
Super. Great. So Atul, moving on our conversation and shifting a little towards your expertise domain, which is of marketing, right? I understand that marketing gets spoken a lot as a function in an organization, as the importance that it has for the organization as a skill. But let's look at a different perspective of marketing. Let's look at it as an individual. Now, as an employee, as a person in my life, personally, professionally, does marketing have any relevance for me? If yes, what would that be?
Yeah. So in essence, what you are saying, Prashant, is, one is your organization brand and one is your own brand. In this case, it may be a leader brand, right? So in many cases, it is very closely intertwined together, especially in the case of celebrities. Like if you take Biocon, it's very closely intertwined with the personality of Kiran. If you take Tesla, then obviously Elon Musk and Tesla's personality very closely. At one point of time, Indra Nooyi stood for what Pepsi stood for, right? Infosys stood at one point of time what Narayan Murthy stood for. So in many cases, it is very closely intertwined. In other cases, it may not. But then marketing really helps facilitate a personal leader brand, right? Which may or may not be as closely intertwined as the examples, but definitely is at the intersection of certain common factors, right?
All right.
So even if I, as a personal brand, if I don't espouse what my organization does, etc., etc., I will definitely espouse for similar values, similar beliefs, similar tone and tenor of my communication and things like that. So here marketing comes in very handy in creating a personal brand. That's what I feel. And I'm not going to talk in too much of detail on this, but because there's no rocket science, there are few things that a leader should definitely do to enhance his own personal brand and its equity. One of the things is definitely he should be a great blogger, I feel, because blogging does two things. A blog is one of the most trusted sources of communication today, right? Secondly, blog means thought leader content. So these two things are given to a blog. So a leader should definitely, espouse his thoughts through a blog. Second thing I feel is, and I'm clubbing it together, is social media and PR, right? A leader should definitely look upon building his personal brand through these two things. And why I have combined these two things is because, again, thought leadership comes through PR and it comes through social media as well, right? Like you become an industry spokesperson, you may not be espoused as your company spokesperson, but you become an industry spokesperson. That's your personal brand. You write authored articles. Not writing about your company, but you're writing about the ecosystem in which your company works in. You're writing about the economy, how things can shape up on the economy. So you are developing a thought leader brand. Similarly, mainly LinkedIn and Twitter are great platforms for creating personal brands, right? You need to keep three things in mind. One is educate, the second is entertain, and the third is motivate. I think all your content on social media and PR, if you keep these three buckets of info in mind, all your content can fall under these three buckets with electric effect. It can help you create a community, it can help you generate conversations, and it can help finally to create a great brand for you. So that's number two. Number three, I feel the next big thing that is coming up now is the podcast itself, right? I think anybody who's reaching a leadership position or who's a leader in his own right cannot today ignore podcasting, right? I was reading a PwC figures very recently, and I was astounded to see that India is the third fastest growing market as far as podcasting is concerned, right? 58 million listeners per month, right? So these are very interesting. So how can you avoid it if you want to voice your opinion? That's what a leader should be doing, right? So very interesting data from KPMG as well. From 2019 to 2020, that is, as the pandemic proceeded, the podcasting, the listeners actually rose by 30%. During this period from pandemic period from 2019 to 2020, right? So leader definitely should use podcast and marketing himself to create a brand for him, right? So these are some of the things that I feel that a leader should do to get massive access to other people's tribes, to create conversations, introduce yourself to new audiences, right? Then there are many other things which I'm not going to highlight, like master classes, panel discussions, networking, which may be more offline than online. But at the end of the day, I mean, the media is all there. And the top three I have listed, I personally feel no leader should avoid these three in creating his personal brand. And I would go to the extent of saying creating your personal brand sounds selfish. You have to voice your opinion selflessly. You have to create conversations, you have to create networks, and your brand will automatically enhance in terms of its equity, right? So you have to build it bottoms up rather than going from top down. Oh, I have to build a brand, so I have to do these things. That's more of a selfish approach, may not work. But if you have more of a content approach and build it up and use the right platforms, there you go. There you use marketing to build your leader brand.
Interesting, Atul. The question that's running in my mind is that, as a leader, if I'm listening to you, I understand what you're saying. How will it help me? Why is it important for me to build a personal brand? What do I stand to lose if I don't do it?
Yes. So your personal brand outgrows your professional tenure, your professional duration, right? One fine day, people leave their profession to pursue their own entrepreneurial spirit. It really helps at that point of time. One fine day, you decide to call it a day and say, listen, now I want to take it easy and do things what I like to do. Then it really helps you. One fine day, you have to retire, right? Then you need to pursue your own interests. So in all the three scenarios, your personal brand will ensure that you don't start from scratch. Your personal brand will ensure that you have a head start. Your personal brand will ensure that you have a community that you can lean back upon, and you can start from there. Rather than chasing people, it can also ensure that people chase you.
Interesting, Atul. And a lot of people that I speak to about personal branding are in a very comfortable space in their career. They're like, Prashant, we are doing very well. I've been in this organization for 30 odd years. I've jumped between 3 to 4 different organizations. I'm an expert in my industry. I'm growing very well year on year. So I don't think I need to do this. All these things are done by people who are not very secure about who they are or where they are right now. But you bring in a very interesting perspective, which is that it's not about your today. It's about your tomorrow, which you don't know what's coming your way. So it's like an investment, where you might not need it at this point of time. But parallelly, if you're building your brand outside your industry and outside the four walls of your organization, you may be known by 10, 20, 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000 people who are within your organization. But beyond that, there is a 99.99999% world that has no clue who you are. And tomorrow, if you build your personal brand, it might be retirement, it might be entrepreneur opportunities or a journey, it might be shifting your job, it might be shifting to a different industry or any other interesting opportunity. If you're putting your thoughts out there parallelly, it's like an investment. You're expressing yourself, you're putting your opinions out there, you're constantly engaging with people. One, your learning and your growth as a person, as a leader is getting better, so you're getting better at who you are. And parallelly, you're building that presence out there. And you said something very interesting, that you have a community that you're building to lean on tomorrow. You have a tribe to lean on tomorrow. And that's what we are as human beings, right? We are social beings. We have to build tribes for our survival and for us to thrive. So it gives you that confidence that tomorrow I have built my equity in some space where I can lean on, because I am trusted in that space as well. It's not just within this organization or within these four walls. So it's become a necessity today rather than a luxury, that we need to make our presence felt. And another thing that you said very interestingly, Atul, is that it should not be selfish in nature, which means it should not be about building our personal brand. That will automatically happen. It should be voicing out your opinion, because there are a lot of people out there who will actually benefit from your experience, from your opinions, from your ideas, from your thoughts. So it should be more about giving and putting things out there, which will relate and result in building a personal brand with time. So very powerful thoughts coming from a marketing expert, and also coming from someone who respects the human aspect of it.
Sure. So there are a couple of sidekicks as well when you talk about building a brand. So you need to do these exercises. So say, to take today's example, right? Very simple example. So whether I have the confidence to talk to Prashant for 1 hour on leadership, right? So I'm testing waters, right? So that's going to help me tomorrow, right?
Mm.
You need to be aware of your strengths, your drawbacks, right? And
Mm.
constantly keep improving. So that is sidekick number one.
Mm.
Sidekick number two to this is, it's also about your passion to give back to the community. Like from a marketing perspective, I write a lot on marketing, right?
Mm.
And when people write back and say they learned this and this infographic that you created was fantastic, and this is a perspective that I had never thought about, you know, uh, what you have learned over the years, I feel it's a duty to give back to the community, right?
Very true.
Right. And most of my writing, say for example, like I don't just write on marketing, I write on jobs, I write on skill development, I write on entrepreneurship, right? And I did a series of jobs for the Times of India editorial, right? Now when your WhatsApp is flooded on a morning that what an article in TOI, or when your LinkedIn page somebody's writing what a great learning it was, it is worth it. And I think every
Absolutely.
leader should do that, because in the process of doing this, you are in essence creating a community of leaders which is outside your organization, outside your immediate ecosystem, and you may be doing a great job at it.
Mm. Very true, Atul. And that sense of satisfaction, the sense of pride, and the sense of a meaning, a purpose to our being, more than just that role that we are playing in an organization, is very satisfying. That I'm doing
Yes.
something beyond what I'm supposed to do in my role. And the best part is that we don't even have any limits to that. Like, I have no clue where this podcast is reaching. We have no clue where this conversation is reaching. It would be reaching to people in parts of the world where we would not even have heard of, or we'll probably never hear of. But something shifted, something clicked with that person, and they got inspired. They picked up something which will drive them to do something that they have been wanting to do as people, as leaders. So, and as a ripple, it will affect other people as well in their ecosystem, in their circle of influence. So we
Right.
don't even know the impact that we are creating, right? And
Yes. Yes.
that's a sense of satisfaction that comes from doing all these things, which
Yes.
is beyond just the role that we have been given. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad you brought that up, Atul. And I think there's a constant reminder that we need to give ourselves about I versus we. That it's not just about me, as much as my world revolves around me, but there is a world around as well, which I
Yes.
need to contribute to in whatever way I can. Small, big is not a definition that we need to attach to it.
Yeah.
Express yourself honestly, put yourself out there, and there are people who will gain from it.
Yeah.
So very well said, Atul. I love this conversation of where we started and how it's actually flowing to where it is right now. Do we have
Yes.
time for one more question, because we
Yeah.
have
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Go
yes?
ahead. We can talk.
Great. So one last question, Atul, I have for you is, and the reason I wanted to bring this is because it brings it an element of variety in our conversation. Now, we have spoken about leadership in a very generalized manner, which means we're not spoken about it in a very industry specific manner. So just out of curiosity, because I know that you have experiences across industries, a quick thought: do you think leadership varies based on which industry you are in? The ways to lead or the challenges of leadership, from your experience, do you think they vary? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, just Prashant, to begin with, I think cross industrial experience, right, and being sector agnostic is absolutely moving out of your comfort zone, and it's not easy from one
Hmm.
profile to another. But at the end of the day, if you look back, it provides very diverse learnings. And
Hmm.
I'm saying this with great deal of conviction because again, this is experiential, right?
Hmm.
This is what I have been through.
Hmm.
So different industries provide diverse learnings, and hence the mental framework of a quote unquote cross industrial leader is likely to be much more robust with
Hmm.
a much wider perspective, right?
Hmm.
Also,
Hmm.
they are more likely to be free from preconceived notions or ideas and things like that.
Hmm.
So let me just pick this up one by one and
Hmm.
explain it to you, because exemplification is the best form of explanation.
Absolutely.
So let me start by my experience at Bharti Airtel, right? What I learned there. So I learned the highest level of meritocracy in that organization. The performance appraisal system there was 100% automated, right? Manual intervention was very limited, minimal, and the system ensured that against any bias, even from any superior. So that's how beautifully, the framework of the system was. So you learned the very high deal of meritocracy there, right? Speed at the rate response at Bharti Airtel. You go back home thinking you have done a wonderful job, you have a campaign ready, you are announcing a major scheme, you have your objectives ready, your distribution channel is ready, and your sales team is ready to move in the market the next morning. The advertising creatives are in the publications. Midnight, you get a message that the competition has preempted you on a SMS message, right? So you go back next day in the morning, and within a day you rewire yourself and you come up with something new, right? Then you are running up the staircase making presentation slides. That's how telecom in its sunrise days was, right? So speed response was absolutely that you learned it the hard way. And finally, a very high degree of revenue orientation. I moved from one organization to Airtel, so I had to adjust my mindset from talking in lakhs to in millions. I had to adjust my mindset from talking in terms of subscribers to revenue. Right? So, just in a nutshell, what I learned to a great deal in Bharti Airtel, number one, highest lot of meritocracy and how it impacts an organization, speed and high speed of response, and finally, bottom line orientation, right? Come to the stint at Tata's now. What I learned was, and I won't elaborate too much here because it's self-explanatory, values and ethics, number one. Number two, highest deal of integrity. Number three, system and process orientation, very robust systems and processes and what it can do for you. So when I talk about values and ethics, Tata's used to have that famous blue book and things like that. So I won't elaborate because it's self-explanatory. Come to my stint at Shaw Wallace, right? Customer centricity. Very few people know that marketing and business orientation in a liquor industry at least goes down to the bar level and actually goes down to the bartender level. So that's how close you get to the customer, right? Brand loyalty. How do you maintain loyalty in a very cluttered market? Value engineering for higher profitability. How do you pick up the existing packaging, existing systems, and turn it into a more profitable venture? What I learned at Shaw Wallace. So I'm just building upon your question about cross-industrial experience. Let's take Biocon, right? Biocon was all about exploration. It was all about experimentation. It was all about quest for knowledge, right? Because you are in a regulated industry, right? You just can't get into the mass media. The industry is regulated by government rules and regulations. So you get into these kind of things. So I've talked to you about Airtel, I've talked to you about Tata, Shaw Wallace, Biocon, and I've talked to you about some of the key learnings or the best practices that you took from these organizations. Now imagine a leader who picks up all these as best practices and takes them to another organization. There's a leader who's been an expert in one industry and picks up the same profile. So that is the point, and so it can have magical impact. Right? Leaders are portable, and hence leadership skills are transferable, and we need to accept this now. Right? So if you bring in leadership, best practices, you are able to segregate some of the things that you need to ignore and bring in some of the best practices. And hence, as a leader, you bring in a much more wider perspective, multiple perspectives. Look at Arundhati Bhattacharya, right? She joined as CEO and chairperson of Salesforce after spending 40 years in State Bank of India. it created ripples, right? It was unheard of, this kind of a shift, right? But then she was heading investment banking, she was heading HR, and she was heading multiple roles in her stint at State Bank, right? And so maybe they took a great call by taking a leader who had multi experiences, and they would not have got a leader like that. But on paper, it looked like a pretty surprising thing, right? But it struck me at that time that Salesforce might be taking a transformational step in their career and their Indian business orientation, right? Look at Leela Nair, global HR head of Unilever, right? Joined as CEO of the luxury company Chanel. Now, where is the synergy? But imagine what could have, a different perspective, different
Absolutely.
set of learning she would have brought to a luxury table. Nowadays, organizations are looking for fresh eyeballs, let me tell you that. And a leader that doesn't come with any baggage could be the right person in many cases, right? Time tells. Only a good leader, whether he's a good leader or a bad leader, only time, it stands the test of time. Time can tell. But the trend is there. Most organizations are looking at fresh eyeballs because, as I said, leader is a great facilitator, right? He need not be a domain expert in every damn thing, but he needs to be a great people manager. Another example, during my time at Bharti Airtel, Manoj Kohli, he was the HR head, and he went on to become CEO at Bharti Airtel. And it heads moved. In the sense that what's happening, and telecom is a pretty technical industry. You have to look at usage and retention, you have to look at acquisition targets, you have to look at telecom networks, you have to look at BPO operations. So it's a pretty technical task. And an HR head becoming the CEO, but let me tell you, he became the CEO with telling effect. The entire culture of the organization changed because we had a HR head as the CEO now.
Yeah.
So he brought a perspective to the table of the CEO that no other CEO could have brought. A fresh perspective, a fresh eyeball. So I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Absolutely, Atul. Very, very intrigued with what you're saying, and very clear message to all of us as leaders, everyone out there who is shying away from diversifying, wants to stick to their domain, their role, their industry itself. It's very important to explore and experiment and diversify your portfolio as you grow. So I understand that it's very important to have that T approach that's very famous, that initially for the first few years of your career you need to go deep, because you can't just keep jumping around various industries, because then you will be nowhere. Go deeper, but as you go deeper you find out that area where you would want to experiment and move on and diversify your portfolio, because you get different perspectives. And once you get different perspective as a person, as an employee, as a leader, whichever role you're in, you're able to contribute more. And when you're able to contribute more, you are valued more, because you bring in some fresh perspectives that others who are stuck in that zone, that domain, are not able to bring, not because they don't want to, because they don't have the exposure to that kind of perspective, so they don't know what to bring to the table. The intentions might be there, but the ability has not developed because they haven't diversified. And with your example that's coming in, it's beautifully, you said that when you diversify your perspective, which is not very comfortable move to make, because your way of leadership has to be different, the expectation from the organizations is different, the expectation from the market is different, the speed of response could be very different, their focus could be on a very different thing, what you had been focusing on earlier. Like, you gave example of people moving from banking to information to HR to the head of an organization. So all this is important right now because fresh perspectives are appreciated. Having said that, if you are somebody who hasn't diversified in your current role, then people won't look up to you as somebody who can take on a challenge, because you haven't shown that capability or the intention to take up challenges in your current role.
Sure.
So that's very interesting, Atul, and I'm glad you brought that forward. And you said something very interesting also in between, where you said that while all this is happening, what remains constant is people. wherever you go, whichever industry you go to, you have to lead people, you have to facilitate journey of your people based on the expectation of the organization. That match needs to happen. So thank you for bringing that forward, Atul. Anything else that's running in your mind that you would like to share which would add value to our audiences?
Since we've spoken so much on leadership, I just want to leave you and the audience with something to ponder upon. Nelson Mandela comes to my mind, right? Many people look upon him as a peacemaker, right? But I think he was a great leader, right? And it ties back into some of the things we discussed when you asked me, like, all this is given, but then how does a leader do it, right? So Nelson Mandela came out of jail after 20 years, a weak, old, haggard person, right? Tortured, and his personality was hugely weakened over the years. He had his body had taken a beating, but he came back, and he had the leadership skill to sit across the table with the same people who had given him so much suffering, right? And to shake hands with them for the benefit of his own country, right? So he started from there. So that's also a great leader. And that's what I was just saying. How do you overcome your personal challenges, right? He had to do it for the sake of his country. Similarly, another leader would need to do it for the sake of his organization. So I just want to leave people with this thought.
Wonderful, Atul. A beautiful thought for us to ponder upon, that leadership is not just about you, it's beyond you as well. The larger cause, the larger purpose that you're serving, the impact that is way beyond us and even our understanding is what leadership is. So we need to accept it that way. So a beautiful thought, Atul, to leave us with. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful experiences with us. And thank you so much for being so honest and candid and easy flow in that entire conversation, where people can sense that, and I could sense that as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I only hope that the audience has found it insightful. I think
Absolutely.
The effort would be worth it, and look forward to our next chat.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much, everyone in the audience, as I always say, for your love and for your support and for the time that you spent here. Everyone watching it live and everyone who will watch it in recording later, thank you so much for your support. And please share in the comments of what insights you got from this show. What else would you like to bring up in the show? What conversations would you like to see in future? That would help me bring more value to you. And for now, thank you so much for your time, and have a very happy Saturday and Sunday. I'll see you next weekend on a Saturday with another amazing guest, bringing in fresh perspectives about leadership. Till then, take care, stay safe.